Vadim Chiline of EpicMind Studio in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Now today I wanted to do a fun battle of giants. In one corner, the Phase One IQ160, slightly dated back from 2011, currently my king of the house, or the roost in the studio, versus the Sony's latest, I guess, flagship camera, the A7rII Mark II, or version 2, mounted with a 90mm macro lens. Now, who's going to win in this awesome boxing match? I don't know. We'll find out. So I've set up over here. I grabbed from my couch this part of the leather, I guess, cushion. I put on a watch. I put on some detail-y stuff, some little flowery, dried stuff. I'm not too sure what it is, just to give some detail work. Let's see how it does for shadow and highlight recovery, as well as color renditions. I have a bit of nail polish, a lip balm, and a gray card in there just to complete the package. So without further ado, let's jump behind the camera and start off with the Phase One IQ160 digital back. All right, so now behind the IQ160 with the Phase One 645DF back. Let's take a quick shot and take a look in Capture One Pro. I'm shooting at f/16 ISO 50, which is the base ISO for that back. And let's look at the image resulting. I got the focus right on the this little bolt, or whatever you want to call it, this little feature on this diesel watch. Obviously, you can see it's grimy, it's dirty. This is my own personal watch I decided to shoot. You can see a nice scratch there. So let's take a look at the different areas that we'll be focusing on. We'll be focusing on sharpness. So looking at the little striations here, the little nice machining marks. We'll be looking at the little dried vegetation here. See how sharp it looks? Looks pretty good. And I'm going to leave the settings exactly as is in Capture One. I'm going to try to not do anything except white balancing. That's about it. So I'll switch now cameras. We'll put on the Sony, and once I shoot the image, we'll start comparing one against the other. Now, just you're going to have to remember that with the Sony, it's a 35mm format, meaning it's going to actually be more landscape versus the square format of the 645 of the Phase One. So I'm going to try to match as best as I can the look. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a difference, so keep that in mind. Also, depth of field is different. If I shoot at f/16 on both, there'll be more apparent depth of field on the 35mm system because of the sensor size. So I'm not going to be doing any focus stacking today. There's a nice video. I did a two-part series on that. We're just going to look at, out of the camera, how do they perform? So I'll be back in a second with the other camera. Okay, so I switched over the camera to the A7rII 2. Added my little flash controller from Policy Buff. I had to recompose the image, as I said, because it is wonky, the formats. Other thing is the exposure. I'm going to set it to f/16 exactly like I had my Phase One. Let's take a look out of the box. Now, you got to make sure to download the latest firmware for the A7rII 2, which is firmware version 2. It allows for uncompressed RAW. And I actually did this test, this whole recording, a previous time, and I realized the results might have been skewed quite a bit in that way. So let's redo it. Let's check it out. And let me take a shot. Another very fun thing about the A7R versus the Phase One is the Phase One is like a classic DSLR or an SLR, where a mirror is basically flapping open to expose the sensor. So what you're seeing is really like on a ground glass kind of way. So it's really what you see is what you get. While over here you got the digital EVF, which is like a mini computer screen. You can either look at it on the back, or the minute you put your eye towards it, you can see the screen there. And what's wonderful is when you're in manual focus mode, you can actually zoom into the image. It will automatically zoom it in, and you can pan through with the little knob at the back where you want to focus. And you can really get pinpoint sharp focus. So For macro work, this is spectacular. I mean, you can't get it wrong. It's like having a giant live view to focus on. So now let's jump in behind the computer with Capture One and do an A and B comparison of the two images. Now within Capture One, we got the two images. So if you look at the general images out of camera, there's a slight difference in exposure and obviously composition, unfortunately, but I'd say it's close enough to give yourselves an idea. Now, obviously the watch face, I didn't pull out the little doodad over here, the crown, just to stop the watch, since I can't really easily do it on this type of watch. So bear with me, it's mainly just to see certain features, certain parts of it, not actual details of what time it is of day. Okay, so first thing let's do is let's take a white balance reading off both, and off the white card over here, white balance that, white balance that. So now they're both equal. So if I put them side by side, you can see the format difference is quite different. Yeah. So if let's zoom in onto the spot where I put the focus, which was at the little, what do you call it, screw mount right over there, and compare one against the other. So let's go to 100% on that one and 100% on that one. So detail-wise, well, you can quickly see, I think, the resolution difference between the Phase One and the Sony on the left. And as I said, I'm shooting raw, uncompressed. Nothing's been done except for white balancing in Capture One. There's a hell of a lot of resolution I find on the Phase One, actually more than my initial test, so that's kind of strange. I'm almost debating if I screwed up the focus, but I'm looking, I think everything's generally more focused and just more detailed on out of camera now from the Phase One. Now obviously the depth of field is quite different. Look at the how much blurrier it is on the right versus the left. Again, I can try reshooting this, like say at f11, and you might say, well, it could be diffraction that's reducing the quality of the lens. You're right, it could be. I can try doing that right now. Let me just do that. Okay, so now in Capture One, let's compare the f11 shot Sony versus the f16 shot Phase One. So let's start off with the screw portion over here. Check it out. And what I did to make it a little bit more even is that I know that Phase One cooks their images ever so slightly in sharpness and stuff using the sharpness tool here. So if I go to the Phase One, let me just put it by, I could put let's put no sharpening. Let's take a look at how it looks and put no sharpening on the Sony and compare how they look. I'd say quite favorably, they look very much the same. I mean, the amount of details, perhaps a little bit more because of the high resolution of the Phase One back. But I'm looking at the striation data. The detail is pretty good. Let's look at the little dirt marks over here. You can basically see the same stuff. Pretty nice. Look at the crown, a little fuzz over here, or a little piece of fur. I'm not too sure what that is. The little fingerprints. Looking around. Out of camera, oops. Go back to 100% on this guy and keep it comparing. Number, seems like the depth of field is slightly getting shallower here, but who cares? It's trying to get a similar feel. I guess it's close. I don't know why it's doing that. I guess I'm moving my mouse. And let's put Phase One to 100%. So really we get 1-to-1 for everything. Okay, let's go look at the little bushiness over here, a little dried vegetation, and let's pixel peep until our heart's content. I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding this is actually pretty darn amazing out of the Sony. I mean, the only thing the Sony so far doesn't have against the Phase One is just the ultimate resolution, but that's about it. But just detail retention, I'd say it's quite spectacular. Very, very nice. So what we can look at is just the color also out of the bat. Let's look at the Revlon over here. Quite close. Is it exactly the same? No, I'd say it's a little bit more red-pink on the Phase 1 versus the slightly more orangey red looking on the Sony. Doesn't bother me. I mean, obviously, some of for fashion work, you know, you'll have a color card and make sure everything's right and go through the art director. So now comes to the fun stuff. Let's try to compare the shadow recovery. So let's try to see if we can get back some leather from in front of the watch. So let's zoom in on both. And let's start with the Phase 1. Let's go to the shadow recovery tool and let's start boosting it up. Let's see what's going on. Let's see if we can get something from the background there. All right, there's a little bit going on. You can see a little bit of dirt. It almost looks like a microscope image. Let's do the same on the Sony. Let's bring up the shadows. There you go. I'd say, wow, that is amazing. That is really, really good. It looks the same, if not maybe better. A little bit better. You can see the nice bouncing of the refraction of the, what do you call it, the lipstick on the left. It's quite good. Look at this. You'd say the exposure is maybe a bit more on the Sony. So let's try pushing the images even more. So let's put it about there, and let's put it about there for the same. I mean, I see actually more noise, I think, in the Phase 1 image than I actually see in the Sony image. So let's move around, see what we can get. I mean, it's quite good. Let's look at another area. Let's look into the actual band. Can we see? Well, look at the amount of noise in the actual Phase 1 image. I'm really, really surprised. Now, there's even some green splotches. Looks like some form of banding is starting to break, or the image is breaking. So I'm not too sure what's going on there. And yeah, I mean, at least the noise on the Phase 1 is pleasant, but there's pretty much no noise on the Sony. So do I have a winner on this side? Oh, I'd say the Sony, I think, might have won on this one for sheer beauty of the image. I mean, it's really impressive. When I did the test last time, actually, I made a mistake. Well, two mistakes. I did the test out of a JPEG image, and I compared it to with the uncompressed RAW as well. And there was banding, there was noise. It just didn't look right. I'm like, no, there's something wrong. I spoke to Alex, and he said, oh, did you try the new firmware? Well, I did that, and now the proof's in the pudding. Quite nice. So let's look again somewhere else, maybe in the other part of the image. Let's look over here. What's going on there? And me, it's the noise levels. They're just so, there's no noise in the Sony, are very, very little. Wow, beautiful. The details come back up. Let's look in the crevice over here. I mean, obviously, you got a hell of a lot more resolution in the Phase 1, and that's one of the main selling points, but also detail retention and shadows and stuff. And really, Sony is doing great. Now let's take a look. Let's put it back to the beginning. Reset everything. And now let's check for highlight retention, or how we can bring back some details there. Now, let's start again with the Phase 1. Let's boost the highlights to the max. Okay, and do the same to the Sony. Well, if you look, there's a weird kind of color fringing happening in the Phase 1, like a magenta cast. It's just happened there, a little color cast as well there. The Sony, no, not at all. No color cast, no nothing. So it's pretty good. I'm looking over here too, and right above that screw point, there's again some color, weird color happening. The Sony, not at all. I'm very, very impressed by the camera. Moving along, looking at the detail. Very nice. Look over here. Get back there. Anyways. Highlights. I'd say it's on par and better than the Phase One. That's my conclusion there. So there you have it, boys and girls. It's quite crazy. I mean, we shouldn't forget that, you know, the technologies are still a few years apart. I'm not comparing the latest Phase One back, which does use a CMOS sensor, just like the Sony does, because the IQ160 uses a CCD-based sensor. So it is an older technology. It's one that's not very good for noise levels, but still for the price difference, wow. Color-wise, again, not bad at all. What's the conclusion of this battle? I'd say that Sony has won pretty much by knockout. I'm blown away. Totally blown away. Did not expect it. I mean, I've heard the camera's been great, but seriously, for a camera that's going around 3,000 US, the lens is about, I think, 1,000, around there. So you're talking about around $4,000 versus a camera that generally, yes, it is old. Don't get me wrong. Some people are going to say, well, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're right. I'm not using the latest XF body with the latest IQ260 back, or 250 back with the CMOS sensor, the 250, I believe. But crap, it's still going to be a 10-time price difference, or approximately there. I mean, I spent a lot of money and a lot of budget on my Phase One, and I love the ability I can crop. And in properly exposed images, the cropping is worth a lot to me. I mean, I do a lot of big prints. My clients enjoy the fact that they can crop my images. Now, Sony, the rumor has it that there might be a very large megapixel SLR type camera coming out in the coming months. Let's see what's gonna come out of that. Are they gonna be the giant crusher? Is it David versus Goliath? I don't know. But you guys should really take a look at the new Sony A7rII with the 90mm lens if you're doing any small product studio work. Killer camera. Not only that, the autofocus system on this camera is spectacular. The EVF is spectacular. The in-camera stabilization is spectacular. The low noise is spectacular. There's a lot of spectacular things. So I think right now we've got ourselves a, quite a beautiful camera on our hands. So guys, try this out. Save your money. This could be a very nice little holiday gift for yourselves. And until then, happy shooting.